who believes about its ancestors. What did they do to protect that story? They cut out all the descendants. And they attribute this story to somebody else, right? That's not going to fit the source that I'm talking about. And when you, by the way, you find so many near misses. You find so many stories that seem to fit, and then at the last minute you see they don't fit the category. What it shows you is this category is a robust category. It really captures something essential. And all they proposed, I had extended correspondence with a professor of classics who thought he had 4 counterexamples to my position. He also thought there were problems with the logic of the position. It was very extended and quite energetic. In the end, he had to admit that none of his examples worked. I wanted to publish it, and he said, "Well, I didn't engage in thorough scholarly research, so I don't want you to use my name." Okay, so I wrote it up. I have it as an appendix of a longer work, and I did a substitute, on the computer. I took out his name and put in the professor. I have the whole.
Is it on your website, or?
It's not on my website, but because it's part of something that I hope to publish. But here's a fellow who's a professor of classics. By the way, he got his degree from Oxford, and he couldn't find counterexamples in the ancient world, and so I think it's a strong and robust category, and it's well supported. Okay, yeah.
What about Pharaoh's dreams? Shouldn't you expect to see those written in Egyptian hieroglyphics?
As far as I understand, the information, the answer to your question will always be, look at the hieroglyphics as a body of literature and see what kinds of things they record and what kinds of things they don't record. Events like that I don't think they even had the vocabulary to record things like that. They have wars, they have construction projects, they have slaves and so forth and so on, but individual experiences?
Bilam Balak, there's a lot of other stories. It's not just Pharaoh's dreams, but shouldn't such stories, when recorded by us, be, at least in some minor cases, affirmed by outside sources?
Well, again, Bilam and Balak was a gigantic defeat. Why should they affirm it? No one wrote down his defeats. Sancherib was a very famous general, and he conquered the whole area. He had a diary. His diary reads like this: I surrounded the city, I broke down the walls, I defeated the army, and I looted the city. City after city after city. Comes to Jerusalem. He says, I surrounded the walls, I locked up the king of Judah like a bird in a cage. End of entry. Next entry. I went to another city and I surrounded the walls, I broke down the walls, and I looted the city. Why? Because he lost his whole army here. His whole army died in one night. He didn't record that. He just recorded the good side, not the bad side. So, given that this is the nature of ancient literature, why would I expect them to record their defeats? Right? Yeah.
But assuming that the Israelite slaves made up a significant portion of the population of ancient Egypt, around 2 million people, right? 2.5 million people, that you would assume that is half the population of ancient Egypt. So for a certain period of time, like whatever the time period of the slavery was, 200 years, let's say, they should have been recording what they would consider victories. And they had enslaved 2 million people to do their construction projects for 200 years. But wouldn't you hope to find that they were recording that aspect of the events? And then, once they escaped and the plagues happened, they ceased to record?
Yeah, well, let's first of all, let's get the facts straight. First of all, the slavery was about 90 years. The total stay in Egypt was 210, but we came in as the upper crust, right? We came in as number one. Number two, it wasn't 2 million people till the end. Right? Population was expanding. Right? So it didn't start off as 2 million people. It started off much smaller than that. That's the last 3 generations out of a 7-generation population increase. Third, there is a reference to a slave class called Habiru, which seems to be Hebrew. There is such a reference. Fourth, I wouldn't trust these estimates as to the population of Egypt, the whole area. Archaeology here is overweeningly expressive of its frail sources. Let me just give you an example. Not I've got to quit for today, but we can go back over this next week in this session. It has been a matter of dispute over the last couple of decades, or even not longer. Was Jerusalem David's capital city, a major city with and Solomon a real king, or maybe it was all made up? They discovered a copper mine in Jordan, roughly where the Tanakh locates a copper mine that was supposed to be Solomon's. Trouble is, it was dated to about 300 years later. A couple of months ago, they revised the dating. And they revised the dating to Solomon's time. The first dating wasn't done right. And now they've done a better dating, and it's revised to Solomon's time. The response from the critical archaeologists was, but we have no record that there was any population at that time. No great population centers. Well, just a few weeks ago, they found on one of the roads leading to Jerusalem a fortification with room for 500 people, 200,000 tons of building material, which they said took at least 10 years to construct, on the road to Jerusalem. If you have that kind of fortification on the road to Jerusalem, could Jerusalem have been the site of 2 or 3 families? Probably not. Probably it had much bigger population at that time. That's from King David's time. Now the truth is that, according to one archaeologist that I read, 80% of the material from the biblical period in this country has not yet been uncovered. 80%. So when they tell you it's a very small population, I want to know, on what are you basing it? Lack of evidence? You know, the famous adage is, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And in this particular case, it's certainly true. Now, Egypt, you're going back hundreds of years before that. So I want to know exactly how accurate this all is, and how much did they dig, and how many different places did they dig, how well do they know what they're looking for. I'm very suspicious of these estimates when they're estimates of absence, when they haven't, in terms of the archaeology that they have. So I don't know whether the population wasn't much bigger. I want you to know that Ebla, one city, which existed 2,000 years before the Common Era, before the patriarchs, one city had 250,000 people. It was a trading city. If one city had 250,000 people, why would you think the entire population of Egypt was only 2 million when they were head of an empire? Right? So when they say the whole population, or 5 million, whatever it is, I think that's just shooting the breeze.